It wasn't the truck that unsettled me first. It was the silence. Denton's fog always rolled thick in early spring, curling around porches like ghosts reluctant to leave. But that morning, the stillness around our little house felt heavier, like something was waiting to be uncovered. I had just zipped up my old backpack, ready to catch the bus to Greenville, when I looked one last time at the garden I'd built with my own hands. Every daffodil was standing proud, as if reluctant to let me go. "Natalie, your breakfast's getting cold," my mother called from the kitchen. Her voice was strong, but I could hear the tremble in it, the one she always tried to hide when goodbyes crept close. Helen Carter was the kind of woman who worked too hard and loved even harder. Her hands were cracked from years of tilling the earth, repairing old library shelves, and raising me alone since the day I was born. That morning, she was flipping pancakes with military precision, but her eyes never left the window. "You need to eat, sweetheart. It's a long ride." I sat on the edge of the chair, stomach twisted with nerves. "I'm not really hungry." She didn't scold me, just slid the plate in front of me and said, "Then pretend." I took the fork and forced myself to chew. Each bite felt like swallowing gravel. The kitchen clock ticked louder than usual, marking the last quiet moments before everything changed. I glanced at her again. "You still think I shouldn't go?" She shook her head slowly. "I think the city won't go easy on you. But you're right. Knowledge is something no one can take." Her smile wobbled. "Still, you'll be all alone there, Natalie." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "So were you. And you raised me just fine." Her grip tightened, then let go. 2 hours later, I stood at the Denton bus depot, a peeling brick building that smelled like old diesel and goodbye hugs. The bus wheezed as it pulled up, its windows streaked with last night's rain. Mom repeated her checklist: money in your shoe, don't talk to strangers, text me the second you arrive. I nodded, pretending to memorize it like it wasn't tattooed on my bones. When we hugged, she held on longer than usual. "Everything will be fine," I whispered, though I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince, her or me. The ride to Greenville felt like time stretched itself thin and translucent. I kept my forehead against the cool glass, watching the green fields blur into gray pavement and tall buildings. For 4 years, I had worked 2 jobs, sorting mail at the post office and helping neighbors weed their gardens, to save up for culinary school. I wanted to cook, not just feed people, but make them feel something: warm, cared for, safe. Mom sold our last goat to help cover my tuition. That kind of love sat heavy in my chest. My dorm room was small and smelled faintly of bleach. I shared it with 2 girls, Amber from Charleston and Jessie from a nearby town, who were nice enough but cautious. Like everyone else, we were just trying to survive the first week. Classes were intense. Chef Hammond didn't believe in easy praise or second chances, but I'd waited years for this. I soaked up every minute. I emailed Mom every night, omitting the homesickness and emphasizing the fun. Her replies were always short, filled with weather updates and proud little affirmations that made me tear up in the dark. Then, one Friday, everything cracked. I came back to the room after class to find the bottom drawer of my bed open. My gut clenched. I dropped my bag, reached under the mattress where I'd taped a thick envelope, every dollar I had for the semester, and it was gone. The room spun. My ears buzzed. I yanked every drawer, flipped my pillow, even tore through my backpack in blind panic. Gone. All of it. I staggered into the hallway, barely breathing. At the RA's desk, Mrs. Carlton, a sour woman with a clipboard permanently attached to her arm, just frowned and said she hadn't seen anything suspicious. On the way back, I bumped into a tall guy in a dark hoodie. I muttered sorry and tried to pass, but he stopped me. "Did someone steal your money?" I froze. "How do you know that?" He shrugged. "I saw one of your roommates digging through your bed when you were in class. The one with the pink hoodie." "Jessie." I backed away, heart thudding. "Why are you telling me this?" He looked at me evenly. Because it happened to me once. I know what it feels like. Let me help. You can cook dinner for me later as payment. I blinked. The guy was probably a year older, with rough hands and quiet confidence. Ryan Dalton, he added. From upstairs. I hesitated. I'd never trusted strangers easily, but I had no one else. Deal, I said quietly and shook his hand. It was warm, calloused, steady. And for the first time since I'd stepped off the bus, I didn't feel so alone. The plan worked. That same night, Ryan and I waited outside the dorm entrance until Jesse stumbled in from the club, mascara smudged, heels in hand. Ryan stepped forward. We know, he said simply. Jesse's face turned ghost white. No screaming. No theatrics. She just reached into her tote, pulled out the envelope, and handed it to me without a word. I didn't ask for an explanation. I didn't want one. The next morning, she moved out. True to my word, I cooked dinner for Ryan that Sunday. The communal kitchen wasn't much, 2 working burners and a sink that dripped nonstop. But I made rosemary chicken with mashed sweet potatoes and fresh herbs I'd smuggled in from home. Ryan peeled carrots beside me, pretending to know what he was doing. So, where are you from? He asked. Denton. Small town, lots of cows, 0 traffic lights. You? Greenville, kind of. Born just outside it. My mom teaches English at a public school. We talked for hours. About food, about broken families, about childhood Christmases that ended in power outages and laughter. There was an ease to him, like he didn't need to prove anything. When he walked me back to my room, I half hoped he'd reach for my hand. He didn't, but I caught myself wishing he had. Over the next few weeks, we fell into an easy rhythm. Steady, cook crash. He'd stop by after classes, bringing random ingredients like star anise or goat cheese, challenging me to make magic. And I did. Cooking with Ryan was different. He didn't just eat, he watched. Like food meant something deeper. He told me once that engineering was just problem solving, and that cooking, to him, looked like a kind of poetry. By the end of the semester, it felt natural to take the next step. We pooled our money and found a 1-bedroom apartment 15 minutes from campus. It was tiny. The bathroom barely fit 2 people. The oven was ancient, and the heater had a personality of its own. But we made it home. I painted the kitchen walls a buttery yellow. Ryan fixed the loose door handle with duct tape and swore it was temporary engineering. The first night in the apartment, we ordered cheap Chinese food and ate on the floor, our dishes resting on a cardboard box. He clinked his soda can against mine. To surviving Jesse and still trusting people. I laughed. To duct-taped doors and overcooked rice. Then he kissed me. Living together wasn't easy. We argued over dishes, over laundry, over me hogging the bathroom mirror every morning. But we also danced in the kitchen while soup simmered. We made late-night pancakes with too much cinnamon. We built a tiny greenhouse on the balcony, just basil, thyme, and 3 succulents I named after spices. Every morning, we had breakfast beside those plants, watching the sun cut through the green leaves. One chilly afternoon, I found Ryan thumbing through an old photo album. My mom sent it, he said. Said it was time I saw my roots. He flipped to a picture of a young woman in a stiff skirt and pearls. That's her, Sandra Dalton. She looks kind of scary here, but she's cool. Strict. Logical. Very. Caroline Ingalls energy. He turned the page. That's my dad. Well, the man I grew up thinking was my dad. Charles Dalton. He left when I was 5. I barely remember him. Just a uniform and long silences. He paused. Sandra never really talked about him much. I guess I just filled in the blanks myself. I froze. Wait, Charles. My breath caught in my throat. My mom said my dad's name was Charles too. Charles Carter. But I never met him. Ryan didn't react right away. He just looked at me. That's probably a coincidence. Charles is a pretty common name, that. I nodded slowly. Maybe it was. But something inside me tugged at the edges of that page, a whisper I didn't want to hear yet. We didn't talk about it again. Instead, we talked about the future. Ryan wanted to open his own contracting company one day. I dreamed of running a farm-to-table cafe with my mom's blackberry pie on the menu. He started calling me Chef Nat whenever I nailed a recipe. I started calling him Fix It Ryan after he unclogged our sink with a hanger and 3 curse words. Life wasn't perfect, but it felt real, honest, earned. And then one evening, as we sipped coffee by the window, Ryan reached for my hand. You know, I could see us living in a real house someday, with a porch swing, maybe even a garden. I smiled, squeezing his fingers. With cows. Only if they cook, he deadpanned. That night, I wrote to Mom and told her about Ryan. Really told her. I even attached a photo of us, sitting barefoot on the apartment floor, spaghetti sauce on my cheek and a grin on his face. I said I wanted her to meet him. Soon. I didn't know that when she saw that photo, something inside her would shift, something tied to a past she had buried so deep it still hurt to look at. It was supposed to be a weekend of introductions, of sunshine and pie and awkward jokes between future in-laws. Ryan and I had been together for almost a year by then, and though we hadn't officially said the words engagement, the thought lingered on our lips like honey we were too shy to taste. I told Mom we were coming down to Denton. I wanted her to meet him. She sounded nervous on the phone, asked for his full name twice. I figured she was just being Mom. Protective. Practical. The morning we left, Ryan packed the car like he was preparing for a survival trip. Snacks, jumper cables, even a blanket rolled tight in the trunk. Small towns get cold at night, he said with a grin. I kissed his cheek. She's going to love you. He grinned wider. How could she not? I fixed your sink. The drive was long and quiet. Snow clung to the edges of the fields, like lace on a hem. I pointed out landmarks from my childhood, the rusted silo where I scraped my knee chasing fireflies, the pond I once fell into after daring a boy to race across it. Ryan held my hand the whole way. You were a menace, he said. Still am, I whispered, and he laughed. But the moment we turned down our dirt road, something shifted. I sat up straighter, my stomach curling tight. That's weird, I said, pointing ahead. That truck looks just like yours. Parked in front of the gate was a dark blue Ford, identical to Ryan's. Same dent above the left taillight. Same faded bumper sticker that read, measure twice, cut once. That is my truck, Ryan said slowly. My heart thudded. Then whose is that? We pulled in behind it, and before Ryan could get out, the front door opened. A woman stepped onto the porch. Tall, blonde, clean-cut coat buttoned all the way up. Ryan's voice caught. Mom. I turned to him. What is your mom doing at my house? He didn't answer, just followed me up the porch steps. I was halfway through the door when I heard it, my mother's voice, broken and raw, saying something that made my entire body go still. They can't know, Sandra. Not like this. Please, we need to tell them together. My breath froze. I stepped inside. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and anxiety. My mother stood at the stove, her eyes red and glassy. Sandra, Ryan's mother, was seated at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that she hadn't touched. Both women looked up at once. Neither smiled. Sit down, both of you, Mom said quietly. We need to talk. We sat side by side, hands still linked. Ryan's knee bounced beneath the table. I had never seen him nervous before. It scared me. I'm going to start, my mother said, her voice tight. Natalie, you've asked about your father for years. I always said he was a soldier, that he left before you were born. That was only part of the truth. I gripped Ryan's hand tighter. His name was Charles Dalton, she said. He served in the same unit stationed near Denton in the early 90s. We were involved. I didn't know he was married. Not at first. I looked at Sandra. Her lips were white. By the time I found out, Mom continued, I was already pregnant. I didn't tell him. I didn't want to wreck his family. I raised you on my own. I never asked him for anything. The room spun. Dalton, I whispered. He was your husband. I turned to Sandra. She nodded. Yes, he was my husband. Her voice cracked. And for years, I told Ryan he was his father. Even I believed it, until I saw you two together and panicked. I thought I had to stop something that wasn't meant to be. I yanked my hand back from Ryan like I'd been burned. No, that can't be. I stood up. My legs trembled. That's not possible. This is a mistake. A cruel, horrible mistake. Ryan's chair screeched as he rose. You're wrong, he told them. You have to be. There's no way. Mom pulled a photo from the drawer. A young soldier stood between two women, one in a pale blue dress, the other my mother. I couldn't breathe. I stumbled outside, snow crunching under my boots, air slicing down my throat like glass. Behind me, I heard Ryan's footsteps. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, hands shoved in his pockets, breath rising in white clouds. I can't believe this, he said finally. You're the only person who ever made sense, Natalie. And now they say we're not, I whispered. We can't be. He looked at me, eyes full of panic and grief. What do we do now? Pretend the last year didn't happen? Pretend this, he gestured between us, broken and burning, wasn't real. I didn't answer. I couldn't. That night, we didn't sleep. We drove back to Greenville in silence, headlights carving shadows into the snow. He dropped me off at the dorm like I was a stranger. I'll pack tomorrow, I said softly. You keep the apartment. I'll find somewhere else. He nodded once. Okay. I watched his truck disappear down the street before I allowed myself to cry. Everything we had built, the laughter, the love, the shared dreams, it all felt poison now. Like a fire that had burned too hot, too bright, and now left nothing but ash. And yet, something inside me refused to let go completely. Not yet. I barely left my room for days. I skipped class, ignored messages, let cold sandwiches rot in the mini fridge. The world had turned to fog again, but not the soft kind from Denton. This was heavy, choking like betrayal in the air. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ryan's face, stunned, hollow, retreating. Every time I opened them, I wished I hadn't. Then came the knock. It was gentle, almost hesitant. When I opened the door, I didn't expect to see her. Sandra Dalton stood in the hallway of my dorm building, out of place in her tailored coat and polished shoes, holding a manila envelope like it was something sacred. Can we talk? She asked. I didn't answer, just stepped aside. She didn't sit, just stood by the window, eyes flicking between me and the gray sky. I owe you more than an apology, Natalie, she said quietly. I owe you the truth. I folded my arms, guarding what was left of my dignity. I think we already got that. Loud and clear. No, she whispered. You got a story, but not the whole one. Sandra took a deep breath and opened the envelope. Inside was a DNA test report. This came back yesterday. I wasn't sure if I'd bring it, but after seeing you and Ryan, after seeing what we did to you, I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I scanned the document. Legal jargon, lab seals, percentages, and then the words that made the world tilt again. Probability of biological relationship, 0%. My knees buckled and I sat down slowly. He's not Charles's son, Sandra said. Ryan. He never was. I blinked. But you said, she nodded, ashamed. I lied, Natalie. Back then, I truly didn't know who Ryan's father was. I told Charles the first was pregnant, hoping it would fix our marriage. It didn't. He left anyway. But I raised Ryan believing it was true, because it was easier than telling him I wasn't sure. And when I saw you two together, I panicked. I thought I had to end it before it became something worse. I made a mistake, Natalie. A one-night mistake when my marriage was falling apart. I told Charles the First was pregnant with his child, hoping it would fix things. It didn't. He left anyway. She walked over, placed the test in my hands. I kept the lie going because it was easier than tearing my son's world apart. And when I saw you with him, so happy, I panicked. I thought I had to stop it before it became something worse. Worse. I snapped. You thought we were siblings. What could be worse? Sandra didn't flinch, tearing down 2 lives built on something that wasn't even real. But now it's out. And the truth is, you and Ryan are not related. Not by blood. Not by anything. I stared at the paper. I wanted to scream, laugh, collapse. Instead, I asked the only question I could. Does he know? She shook her head. He won't answer my calls. I tried. He shut me out. But maybe he'll listen to you. I took the test from her hands. My fingers trembled. Why now? Because I saw the way he looked at you, Natalie. Like you were the only solid thing in a world that constantly moved. And I realized I would rather risk him hating me than let him lose you forever. Sandra left quietly. I stayed by the window long after she'd gone. The envelope clutched against my chest like a lifeline. Then I moved. It was raining when I got to their apartment. Our apartment, the one I hadn't stepped into since that night. I knocked once, then twice. No answer. Ryan, I called softly. It's me. I need to talk to you. Silence. I tried again. Please, open the door. A beat. Then I heard footsteps. The click of a lock. The door opened just enough for me to see his face. Unshaven, pale, eyes red-rimmed. What are you doing here? He asked, voice hoarse. I held out the envelope. I came to give you the truth. He didn't move. Another one. This one's different. This one sets us free. He took it. Read it. And for a moment I thought he might laugh. Or break something. Instead, he sank onto the couch like the wind had left his body. I don't know what to believe anymore, he said. My whole life I thought I was Charles Dalton's son. I thought I had his eyes, his temper, his failures. I sat beside him. Not too close. Just enough. You believed in the only version of the story you were given. But that's not your fault. He looked at me then, really looked. And what about us? I don't know yet, I admitted. But I know we're not siblings. And I know I never stopped caring about you. He ran a hand through his hair. I want to believe it, Natalie. I want to believe this nightmare is over. But I'm scared. I reached for his hand. He let me take it. Me too. We sat in silence, the rain tapping the windows like old ghosts asking to be let in. Somewhere inside us, something fragile started to mend. It wasn't a dramatic reunion. No rushing into each other's arms. No music swelling behind us like in the movies. It was quieter than that. More fragile, like standing on the ice of a half-frozen lake, testing every step. That night, I didn't stay. I told Ryan I needed time to breathe, to think, to believe this new truth wasn't just another trick of the past. But as I left, he didn't let go of my hand until the very last second. That meant something. Over the next few days, we texted. Nothing poetic, just check-ins, small updates, photos of meals neither of us had the appetite to finish. On the 4th day, I sent him a picture of the first cupcake I'd made since everything fell apart. He replied, not bad. Still missing your frosting. It was the first time I smiled and meant it. A week later, I knocked on the door of the apartment that used to be ours. He opened it immediately. No questions, no hesitation. I made pasta, he said. It's probably terrible, but I figured maybe you'd want to come home. That word. Home. I walked in. The apartment hadn't changed much, but there were new plants on the windowsill. The same thrift store blanket on the couch. My old apron still hung behind the kitchen door. I sat at the counter while he fumbled with Parmesan and cracked jokes about forgetting how to boil water. We didn't talk about what had happened. Not yet. But as we sat across from each other, the distance that had felt miles wide began to shrink inch by inch. After dinner, I showed him the photo of my biological father. Dr. Adam Whitman, I said. He's a surgeon at Greenville Medical. He doesn't know I exist. Not really. Ryan's expression shifted, part sympathy, part curiosity. You want to meet him? I nodded. I think so, but I need to be ready. He leaned forward. Then I'll go with you. When you are. I hesitated. You don't have to. He held my gaze. I want to. The next afternoon, I sat across from a man I had never met but somehow always wondered about. Dr. Whitman was calm, composed, with a deep voice and eyes just like mine. He said he remembered my mother, Helen Carter. Said he never knew she'd had a child. When I told him my name, his eyes glistened. I would have come, he whispered. If I'd known, I would have come. I believed him. He didn't ask for anything, just offered me time, space, a bridge, if I ever wanted to cross it. When I left his office, Ryan was waiting downstairs, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed and a coffee in each hand. You okay? He asked. I nodded, and he didn't press further. Later that week, Sandra reached out to Ryan too. They met at a diner on the edge of town. She told him everything about the affair, the confusion, the lie that grew too heavy to carry. Your real father, she said, is a man named Dr. Eric Langston. Lives in Denver. Never knew about you. Ryan didn't answer her for a long time, just stirred his coffee until the spoon clicked rhythmically against the cup. So I've lived 21 years being someone I'm not? He finally asked. Sandra's eyes welled up. You've always been you, Ryan. That part was never a lie. He told me about it that evening. We sat on the floor, backs against a couch like we used to when our mattress was still propped up on milk crates. I don't know if I want to meet him, he said. I mean, I have a hard enough time trusting my reflection these days. I placed my head on his shoulder. There's no rush. Maybe you never will. Maybe that's okay. I thought I knew who I was, he whispered. Now I'm not sure I even know how to be around you. You don't have to know, I said. You just have to stay, and we'll figure it out. His hand found mine. No shaking this time, just warmth. That weekend, we invited both mothers to dinner. It was tense. Helen wore her best church dress. Sandra brought wine she never touched. They sat stiffly at the table while Ryan and I tried to steer the conversation toward safe topics. Work, weather, a new bakery that opened nearby. But eventually the silence cracked. I don't expect forgiveness, Sandra said quietly, but I want to make space for peace. My mother nodded. We both made choices. Some good, some meant to protect our kids, but ended up hurting them more. She looked at me. I thought keeping the truth from you would shield you. Instead, it just left you unprepared for the truth when it found you anyway. I understand, I said. I'm still angry, but I understand. They didn't hug. Not that night. But something softened between them. The edge dulled. After they left, Ryan turned to me. So what now? I reached up and touched his face. Now we stop surviving and start living. He smiled, slow and full of something old and new at once. Together. Always. 3 weeks passed like a dream we didn't dare name. Not quite real, not quite fiction. Just suspended between memory and possibility. Ryan and I moved slowly, deliberately, like people were learning how to walk after a long fall. Every breakfast, every shared smile, every quiet evening of takeout and worn-out movies was a thread stitched back into something resembling peace. One night, I stood in the kitchen, chopping carrots for soup, when Ryan came and holding a bouquet of chrysanthemums. White, wild, a little unruly. They looked like something you'd grow on a windowsill, he said. I buried my face in the petals. You remembered my favorite. He smiled. You're kind of unforgettable. That night, as we sat on the floor eating dinner by candlelight, I said it out loud. Let's invite them. All of them. Our moms. My father. Your maybe father. Everyone. One dinner. One table. Ryan blinked. You want to put them all in the same room. Yes, I said, because if we don't, the silence will keep talking for us. He paused, then nodded. Okay, let's do it. The guest list wasn't easy. Dr. Whitman agreed immediately, gentle, patient, already easing into his new role as a father with the quiet grace of a man who'd lost time but didn't intend to lose more. Ryan's biological father, Dr. Langston, was harder. He was stunned at first, wary even. But after 2 phone calls and a letter Ryan wrote by hand, 3 full pages and not a single erased word, he agreed to fly in from Denver. I don't know what kind of place I have in your life, he said, but I'd like to sit at your table if there's a seat. So we prepared. The apartment had never seen this much effort. I borrowed extra chairs from a neighbor, ironed cloth napkins for the first time in my life, and dug out my grandmother's ceramic serving platter. Ryan tried to fix the wobbly table leg and nearly broke the entire thing, so we balanced it with an old geometry textbook. That's engineering, he claimed. Creative problem solving. On the night of the dinner, the apartment was lit with candles, the kitchen warm with the smell of rosemary chicken and vanilla custard cooling on the windowsill. Ryan wore the only button-down shirt he owned. I wore a soft blue dress that used to hang untouched in the back of my closet. And then they came. My mom arrived first, carrying a jar of peach preserves and looking more nervous than she had the day she dropped me off at culinary school. You look beautiful, she said, hugging me tight. You look brave. Dr. Whitman followed, tall, composed, hands shaking only a little as he handed me a bouquet of sunflowers. For my daughter, he said softly. Then came Sandra, awkward but determined, holding a plate of deviled eggs like it was a peace offering. She kissed Ryan's cheek and gave me a hug that surprised us both. Last came Dr. Langston, straight from the airport, a small box in hand. Inside was a compass. I kept this from med school, he said to Ryan. I figured maybe it's time to pass it on. We sat, all 7 of us, around one table, one meal. At first, the conversation was safe, small, polite. How's the weather in Denver? How's the new library position, Helen? But then Sandra looked across the table and said, I know I hurt every person in this room, but I'd like to spend the rest of my life trying to repair that. No one spoke right away. Then my mother nodded. I think we all did some breaking, and now we all have to build. Ryan reached under the table and took my hand. He cleared his throat. If it's okay, I'd like to say something. Everyone turned to him. He stood up, visibly nervous, but with the kind of steadiness I'd learned to recognize in him. Earned, not inherited. A year ago, he said, I met a girl in a hallway. She'd just been robbed. She looked like she'd been through hell, but still had the fire to make a home-cooked meal out of a half-stocked fridge. I thought I was helping her, but it turns out she helped me become someone I actually like. His voice trembled. I spent my whole life trying to live up to the image of a man I thought was my father, but now I know who we are isn't about blood. It's about what we choose to carry forward, the kind of people we choose to be, and the kind of love we choose to hold on to. He looked at me then, and I choose you. Tears slipped down my cheeks before I could stop them. I love you, he said, and I want to build a life with you. Messy, complicated, real. All of it. Silence filled the room like warmth, and then applause. Not loud, but genuine. We raised our glasses, lemonade for my mom, wine for the rest, and toasted not to the past, but to everything we had yet to become. 1 month later, I sat alone on a park bench, fingers twisting the strap of my purse, breath catching at every passerby. I was early, half an hour early actually, but it didn't matter. I needed the time. The air was cool, bright with the scent of early spring, and somewhere nearby, a carousel was playing faint music that made the moment feel both too small and too enormous. Today, I was meeting my father again. Not the man I'd imagined for years, a soldier in a photo, a ghost in my mother's stories, but the man who sat across from me 2 weeks ago in a hospital cafe and cried when I said his name, Adam Whitman. I'd said that day, I think I'm your daughter." He hadn't denied it. He hadn't looked away. He'd simply said, "I was wondering when you'd find me." Now he was walking toward me again, a coffee in one hand, a small paper bag in the other. "Croissant," he said, "for courage." I took it, smiling. "You remembered." We sat quietly for a while, watching ducks drift across the pond. "You have your mother's shoulders," he said, "but the rest? I think that's me. Do you regret it?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Not knowing me?" He didn't hesitate. "I regret everything I missed, but I don't regret knowing you now. It wasn't perfect. It didn't erase the years, but it mattered." Meanwhile, Ryan had started writing weekly letters to Dr. Langston. They weren't long. Sometimes just lists, books he was reading, meals he and I cooked, things he fixed around the apartment. But each letter ended with the same line: "I'm still learning who I am, but I'm grateful you're part of that journey now." One night, as we sat on the balcony surrounded by my little jungle of herbs and succulents, Ryan looked at me and said, "You know, it still scares me sometimes. That one wrong move, one buried truth, almost took you from me forever." I turned to him, but it didn't. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "I'm glad we fought for it, even when we didn't know what we were fighting." The following week, we returned to the lake in Denton, the place where everything had changed. The same trees, the same quiet ripple of water, but it didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt reclaimed, renewed. That afternoon, we signed the lease for a new apartment, just a little bigger, with real floors and windows that didn't leak. My mom helped us move in. She brought old curtains and too many casserole dishes. Sandra sent a housewarming gift from across the state, a waffle iron and a handwritten recipe that said, "For Sunday mornings worth remembering." Dr. Whitman visited once a week. He even came to the school where I was finishing my culinary degree, surprising me during a final presentation with a single sunflower and the worst joke I've ever heard about burnt toast. I introduced him to my professors as my father. The words felt strange on my tongue, but they stuck. Dr. Langston and Ryan eventually met in person, quiet, formal, but steady. They walked for hours around a botanical garden in Denver, and when Ryan came home, he said, "He's not the man I imagined, but he's someone I want to get to know." That was enough. Then, one Sunday morning, Ryan woke me before the sun had fully risen. He took me by the hand and led me to the park where we used to walk before class, where he once dared me to teach him how to make biscuits from scratch and ended up covered in flour. There, under a tree, just beginning to bloom, he knelt. No fanfare, no crowd, just us. "Natalie Carter," he said, "I've loved you as a stranger, as a maybe, as a miracle, and as someone I thought I had to let go. But now I want to love you as my wife. No more confusion, no more silence, just us and the truth we chose." I cried, of course. The ring wasn't flashy, a simple gold band with a tiny, soft green stone. "It reminded me of sage," he said. "You make everything grow." "I do," I whispered, "when you're near." We planned the wedding for late fall, nothing big. Just family, close friends, a table full of home-cooked food and mismatched chairs under the trees. I made my own cake. Ryan built the arch from reclaimed wood. Our mothers walked us down the aisle, side by side. And when I looked into his eyes that day, I didn't see pain or doubt anymore. I saw everything we'd survived, and everything we were building. It wasn't the life I expected, but it was the one we made, together. That night, as we stood in the garden wrapped in string lights and laughter, I leaned my head on Ryan's shoulder and whispered, "We should have broken, you know, with everything." He held me tighter, but we didn't. "No," I said, "we bent. We cracked, but we didn't break." Above us, stars blinked into view like tiny promises, and inside me, for the first time in a long time, was peace. Looking back, I've realized something no one ever teaches you in school. Family isn't just about blood, and love isn't always about fairy tale endings. Sometimes it's about choosing to stay, to ask the hard questions, To listen, even when it hurts. To forgive, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. We were all raised by imperfect people, but that doesn't mean we have to keep repeating their silence, their fear, their lies. We can choose to break the cycle, to speak, to heal, to build something better, even if it takes time, even if it's messy. And most importantly, we can choose love. Not the easy kind, but the kind that grows roots after the storm. That's what saved me. And maybe it will save you too. Another month without a job, huh? Maybe you should apply at that cafe down the street, Vivian. At least they give you a cute apron. Andrew's voice was full of smug amusement as he raised his glass. Laughter erupted around the table. 5 men in tailored suits leaned back, their crystal glasses catching the rooftop lights like trophies of power. I held my wine quietly, the stem pressing into my palm, my smile frozen, fragile, hollow. I didn't speak. I lowered my gaze, letting my hair fall just enough to shield my expression. They couldn't see my eyes, but if they had, they might have noticed I wasn't humiliated. I was calculating. We were 26 floors above the streets of Chicago, the city sparkling beneath us like a false promise. The rooftop of the Waldorf Astoria was alive with laughter and clinking glass, but every sound felt like a blade pressed against my skin. And none of them, especially not Andrew, had any idea who they were really mocking. I sipped the wine slowly, letting the bitterness sit on my tongue. A reminder to stay quiet, to stay patient. They thought I was just a failed woman, a lucky wife who landed a generous husband, someone to pity, or worse, to laugh at. Vivian, one of Andrew's colleagues, chimed in. Andrew should start a charity for wives who just can't seem to get hired. Poor thing. Andrew chuckled. Oh, come on, she's working, doing in-depth research on Netflix's rom-coms. More laughter, louder this time. I didn't flinch. I'd trained myself not to. Years of this, being the punchline, the forgotten one at events, the ghost of a woman no one took seriously. But once I was loved by this man. Once, he looked at me like I was his partner. Now I was just a decorative shame, a convenient narrative, a quiet shadow behind his bright, boastful light. There were days I questioned myself. Was I not enough? Not strong enough, not smart enough? But deep down I knew who I was. I built an empire from the ground up, a tech security powerhouse trusted by the largest corporations in the country, a company worth 9 figures, and the very same company that signed the checks for every man sitting at this table. They didn't know. Not Andrew. Not his arrogant inner circle. Not a single one of them suspected that the woman they mocked was the founder and CEO of Colworth Systems. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to storm out. Revenge is best served, not just cold, but perfectly timed. And time was the one thing I had mastered. Tomorrow morning, I would walk into that boardroom, not as a joke, not as Andrew's unemployed wife, but as the woman who owned their titles, their futures, and their fate. And I would take it all back. But for tonight, I let them enjoy their illusions. I placed my wine glass gently on the table, leaned back in my chair, and smiled to myself. Laugh while you can, I whispered under my breath, because tomorrow none of you will be laughing. Andrew Cole was not always this cruel, at least not in the beginning. We met 10 years ago at a cybersecurity conference in San Francisco. I wasn't looking for anyone. I had just landed my second round of funding for Colworth Systems and was too consumed by code and contracts to care about romance. But Andrew was charming, warm, attentive, just the right mix of confident and careful. He saw me standing alone with a drink and asked about the book I was reading. Not my outfit, not my hair. That mattered to me. He listened when I spoke, asked questions, laughed at all the right moments without sounding performative. He made me feel like I could exhale, like I didn't have to perform to be seen. When we started dating, I didn't tell him who I really was. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I wanted to believe love could exist without power attached. So I told him I was a freelance financial consultant, struggling to build a client base. I lived in a modest apartment in Lincoln Park, drove a pre-owned Civic, wore clean but forgettable clothes. It was the version of me no one expected anything from, and Andrew embraced it. At first, he was supportive. He made breakfast on Sundays, edited my fake client presentations, even encouraged me when I pretended to be rejected from jobs I never applied for. I remember thinking, maybe this is real. Maybe I could just be Vivian, not Ms. Colworth. But then things shifted. Slowly, subtly, the compliments faded. The gentle encouragement turned into passive-aggressive jokes. "Still working on that resume," he'd say while brushing his teeth. "You know, not everyone's cut out for the corporate world." He stopped asking about my day, stopped pretending to believe in me, and that's when I realized something painful. Andrew didn't fall out of love with me. He fell out of love with the version of me he thought he could rescue. He needed to be the hero, the provider, the one who saved the woman with no power. The moment he felt I was no longer grateful, I became disposable. By the 3rd year of our marriage, Andrew had fully reinvented himself. New wardrobe, new haircut, expensive watch, and a sudden obsession with boardrooms and buzzwords. He made sure everyone knew he was a self-made success, rising through Colworth's ranks on sheer brilliance alone. He loved the sound of his title, Executive Vice President. I had given him that title. I had approved his promotion, and he never once asked how he got there, because in his mind it was all him. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at himself in the mirror, adjusting his tie, murmuring things like, "They need me in the room," or "I lead this company." And every time, I'd smile politely, pour his coffee, and wonder how long it would take before he crashed. I never corrected him, never hinted at the truth, because the longer he underestimated me, the harder the fall would be. I kept my power in shadows, built layers of protection, alternate names on documents, a network of silent partners, legal shields that placed me in control without ever being seen. And all the while, Andrew thought he was the star, thought he was the one steering the ship. He didn't know he was standing on a stage I built, a stage that was now cracking beneath his feet. People think revenge starts with anger. Mine didn't. It started with grief. The grief of realizing the man I once loved only the version of me that made him feel powerful. And once I outgrew that version, he had no use for me. That's when I stopped trying to win him back and started building the world he'd never survive in. The world I would reveal tomorrow morning. It began with a whisper, not in a boardroom, but in the hallway outside one. A young intern named Carla, barely 22, bright as daylight and shaking like a leaf, was crying near the elevator banks. No one stopped, except me. She didn't recognize me, of course. No one did. That was the point. I asked if she was all right. She said nothing at first, just wiped her tears and tried to smile. Then I gently said, "You don't have to pretend." And that's when she broke. They had cornered her after a product demo, told her she wasn't team material, that her blouse was too distracting for a workplace filled with serious men. I didn't need to ask who they were. I already knew. That was the moment the grief I had been carrying turned into steel. It wasn't just about Andrew anymore. It was about every woman in that building who was told to smile while being stepped on. It was about every brilliant idea dismissed, every voice silenced. So I stopped waiting, and I started building. I hired the best private investigators money could buy. Former federal agents, data recovery specialists, forensic accountants. They had one job, watch, document, gather. I gave them access to Colworth's internal systems I had designed, encrypted, and controlled. Every email, every Slack message, every calendar invite and late-night business dinner receipt came through me. Within 2 months, I had enough to make the Securities and Exchange Commission raise an eyebrow. But I wasn't done. I wanted to understand how deep the rot went, so I created a new identity. Not as Vivian Cole, not as the CEO, but as Sophie Rayner, an unemployed data analyst, mediocre on paper, no connections, no glow, just another name in a sea of applications. And Colworth Systems, my company, welcomed me in the same way it always did women like me, with arrogance, with disdain, with a smirk. The interview was conducted by 3 of Andrew's closest lieutenants. I knew their names. I'd once approved their bonuses. They didn't even pretend to read my resume. One looked me up and down with a smirk. "You've been unemployed for how long?" he asked. "Almost a year," I replied softly, playing the part. Another one chuckled. "Yikes. Job market's rough out there, huh?" I could see the contempt dripping from their posture. I could feel the way they mentally discarded me. To them, I was invisible, and that's exactly what I needed to be. One of them started texting mid-interview. A minute later, all 3 phones buzzed at once. I didn't need to look. Andrew was laughing somewhere. He knew I was there, and like always, he thought I was harmless. I walked out of the room with no callback, no offer, no "we'll be in touch." But I had something better. I had a front row seat to their rot, how they dismissed talent, how they reinforced their boys' club, how they ran this company like a fraternity with a trillion-dollar client list. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just opened my laptop and started labeling files. Financial fraud, workplace harassment, insider trading, suppressed HR complaints, sexist internal memos, corruption contracts. It wasn't a revenge file. It was a reckoning folder. I wasn't just going to fire them. I was going to expose them. Not for me, but for every single person they crushed under their Gucci loafers. The storm was coming, and this time, I would be the one holding the thunder. The interview lasted exactly 15 minutes, but taught me everything I needed to know. I walked into that glass-walled conference room on the 7th floor of my own building, wearing a suit I bought at a second-hand store. The hem was slightly frayed. The shoes were scuffed. I had tied my hair back in a way that said, "Trying too hard to look professional." I looked unremarkable. That was the point. 3 men were already seated, sipping coffee from branded Colworth mugs. I knew them well. I had seen the invoices that approved their obscene bonuses. I had seen the vacation photos they posted from company retreats that excluded women. They didn't look up when I entered. "Take a seat," one of them said, scrolling on his phone. I sat, smiled politely, waited. Another man flipped through my printed resume like it was a napkin. "You've been unemployed for a while," he said flatly. "Yes," I replied. "Since my last contract ended, I've been looking for something long-term." He raised an eyebrow. "Any reason nothing's worked out?" I paused. The real me, the Vivian who signed their paychecks, wanted to answer with sharp clarity. But Sophie Rayner, she stayed small. "Just bad luck, I guess." He nodded, not kindly, just knowingly, the kind of nod you give someone you've already dismissed. The questions that followed weren't questions. They were tests. Why should we pick you over someone younger? What makes you think you'd fit into a fast-paced team? Are you comfortable taking direction, especially from male colleagues? They didn't say male out loud, but it was there, dripping between the lines like oil. Halfway through the interview, one of them pulled out his phone. He was texting. I didn't need to see the screen. I knew the rhythm of Andrew's messages. 2 minutes later, all 3 phones buzzed. One of them snorted. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered under his breath. Another chuckled. "She's got spirit, though. I'll give her that." No one explained what was funny. No one needed to. I sat there still, not hurt, not embarrassed, just observing. These were the men running my company. These were the decision makers. And this was the culture they had built. I answered their questions calmly, softly, without confrontation, because I wasn't there to be hired. I was there to remember. When it ended, they didn't shake my hand, didn't offer a smile or a thank you. One of them just said, "We'll be in touch." And I nodded, knowing they never would be. I walked out through the hallway of my own building, walls I had designed, floor tiles I had approved, and no one recognized me. That anonymity should have hurt, but instead it freed me. Back in my apartment, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and moved the interview folder into a new subdirectory. Final layer. Because now I had everything. Proof of corruption. Proof of abuse. Proof of a culture designed to humiliate, discard, and silence. And now I had seen it from the inside. Tomorrow morning, they would walk into a boardroom, thinking it was business as usual. They would sip their coffee, talk over each other, crack a few jokes, and then they would see me. Not Sophie, not Andrew's wife, not the unemployed woman at the dinner table, but me, Vivian Cole, founder, CEO, and the storm they never saw coming. The morning sun hadn't even warmed the sidewalks when I stepped into the lobby of Colworth Systems, but already there was tension in the air. Executives rushed past, phones in hand, murmuring about contracts, forecasts, end of quarter pressure. They nodded at me with polite indifference, none of them recognizing the woman behind the tinted glasses and structured navy coat. That was fine. Let them underestimate me for a few more minutes. I took the elevator to the top floor, the executive level. Normally, I entered through the back, using a private corridor meant for confidential meetings. But not today. Today, I wanted every single person in that building to see me walk in through the front. The boardroom was already filling up when I arrived. Long mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a sweeping view of downtown Chicago. The company's elite sat around it, shareholders, executives, senior advisors. At the head of the table, I took my seat. No fanfare, no announcement, just quiet authority. Behind me, a massive LED screen displayed nothing but the company logo. For now. The door opened again. Andrew walked in, followed by his 4 closest friends, all grinning, laughing about some joke I didn't care to hear. They hadn't seen me yet. Not until Andrew turned to take his seat at the other end of the table, and froze. His smile faltered. Eyes narrowed. He looked around the room, confused, searching for context that didn't exist. "Vivian," he asked, laughing awkwardly, "what are you doing here?" I placed my hand gently on the thick folder in front of me. My voice was calm, clear. "Sit down, Andrew. You and your friends will want to hear what I have to say." He hesitated, then obeyed. The others followed, suddenly silent. "Before we begin," I continued, looking him directly in the eye, "I'd like to reintroduce myself." I stood. "My name is Vivian Cole. I am the founder and CEO of Colworth Systems." The room froze. No one breathed. Shock rippled across every face. Andrew's skin drained of color. One of the other men whispered, "You're lying," but I didn't need to argue. I clicked the remote. The logo on the screen vanished. In its place, documents, spreadsheets, emails, recordings, each one time-stamped, verified, irrefutable. "For the past 2 years," I said evenly, "you've stolen from this company. You've abused your power. You've manipulated contracts, leaked confidential data, and fostered a culture of humiliation and exploitation." No one spoke. No one blinked. Every single transaction has been documented. Every dinner billed to the company card. Every private message you thought would stay private is on this screen. I turned to Andrew. "And no, I haven't forgotten the way you mocked me in front of your friends. You laughed because you thought I was beneath you, but you only stood so tall because I let you." The room was silent, and then I signed the first paper. Termination. Andrew Cole. Then the next, and the next. Each page slid down the table like a guillotine. "You're all fired. Effective immediately." Andrew shot to his feet. "You can't do this," he yelled. "I'm the vice president." "You were," I cut in, cold as glass. "You never built this company. You were just lucky enough to ride the wave until it drowned you." The doors opened. Security entered. Not rushed, not dramatic, just prepared. Andrew turned to his colleagues, but no one moved. No one defended him. They kept their eyes down. He was alone. "You have 10 minutes to collect your things," I said. "Your access has already been revoked. Leave quietly before I make this even uglier." He stared at me and saw nothing left to fight. One by one, they were escorted out, not as executives, not as power players, but as disgraced men who never saw it coming. And I didn't even watch them go. I had better things to do, starting with rebuilding the empire they tried to poison. By the time I returned to my office on the 40th floor, the news had already spread. Someone had leaked footage, probably one of the shareholders, or maybe someone in legal. The clip was only 47 seconds long, but it was enough. Andrew's face, frozen mid-outburst. My voice, sharp and unwavering. "You were just lucky enough to ride the wave until it drowned you." The video went viral before lunchtime. Financial blogs ran with it first. CEO shocks boardroom with mass termination. Colworth Systems purges top brass after secret corruption probe. Then came the business networks. Then Reddit. Then TikTok. Someone even started a trend. Hashtag the Vivian effect. But I didn't care about hashtags. I wasn't chasing headlines. This wasn't revenge porn. It was justice finally breathing. Within hours, recruitment firms began withdrawing offers made to Andrew's friends. 3 of their wives filed for divorce, 2 the very same day. One of them, reportedly, had no idea her husband had been funneling company funds into a secret offshore account. And Andrew, the man who once wore a $12,000 watch to family dinners, the man who once referred to me as his philanthropic project, he had become a ghost. An old colleague ran into him weeks later at a small electronics chain in the suburbs. He was working the floor, folding boxes, scanning barcodes. No suit, no Rolex, no arrogance. She told me his face looked hollow. His smile had collapsed into something that looked more like apology than pride. I didn't need to see it to believe it. I didn't need to gloat. He had already destroyed himself. All I did was let the truth be seen. But my focus wasn't on Andrew anymore. It was on the people who were still here, the ones who had stayed silent, not out of cowardice, but because no one ever listened. The interns who tiptoed through toxic meetings. The engineers passed over for promotions because they didn't play golf. The HR managers who cried in parking garages because their reports got lost. They were the reason I came back, not just to remove the rot, but to make sure it never returned. That afternoon, I called for a company-wide meeting. Thousands of employees joined the live stream. No makeup, no script, no PR prep, just me standing in front of them. "I know many of you are confused," I began, "but what happened today wasn't chaos. It was correction." And then I told them everything. The investigations, the corruption, the cover-ups, the silent hands that guided so many good people out the door. I ended with this. We're not going back to what Colworth was. We're building something new. And this time, no one will be left behind. After the meeting ended, I stayed in the room alone. Dozens of messages poured in. Some were thank yous, some were apologies, but the one that stuck with me came from Lisa. Lisa Hull, a brilliant software engineer forced out 3 years ago because she refused to attend Andrew's Friday networking parties. Her message was short. "Do you really want me back?" I replied instantly. "I don't just want you back. I want you to lead our AI division." 3 days later, Lisa walked back into Colworth Systems, and for the first time in years, the hallways didn't feel heavy. They felt alive. Smiles returned. Doors stayed open. Ideas were shared, not stolen. It wasn't just a company anymore. It was hers, theirs, ours. And I finally felt like I belonged too. Rebuilding a company isn't about replacing people. It's about rewriting the story they were forced to live in. That's where I started. The first thing I did was clean house. Not just the executives, but everyone who had enabled them. HR directors who buried complaints. Team leads who laughed off harassment as office banter. Managers who punished women for saying no. They were gone. Not with cruelty, with clarity, because this wasn't vengeance. It was accountability. Then I opened every channel that had once been sealed shut. An anonymous reporting system. A direct whistleblower hotline. Unfiltered, unanswered by layers of bureaucracy. A promise, written in plain English. You will be heard. And for the first time they were. I remember the first week after the purge, walking through the halls and catching conversations I hadn't heard in years. Laughter. Not the sharp kind, cutting, cruel, exclusionary, but the soft, startled kind that bubbles up when people realize it's safe to breathe again. Within a month, we brought back 23 former employees. Women, minorities, people with voices that had once been too loud, too emotional, too much. Now they were exactly enough. I launched a mentorship program, not just for optics, for action. Each senior leader was paired with a new hire, many of them women in tech, first-generation graduates, or returning professionals who had left toxic workplaces. They weren't told to prove themselves. They were told, you belong here. Let's build together. Lisa, the engineer Andrew had once pushed out for not being a team player, was now leading our AI research division. Her team? Handpicked from talent previously overlooked. Within weeks, they had already developed a prototype that stunned one of our largest clients. And the best part? No one in that room tried to take credit for it. We implemented leadership ethics training, not a once-a-year seminar, but real, hard conversations. What power means, what trust looks like, what silence can cost. I wasn't interested in empty apologies. I wanted transformation. And slowly, I saw it happening. People began speaking up. Meetings started ending with consensus, not resentment. Managers began asking, "How are you doing?" And meaning it. The air changed. The energy changed. We weren't perfect, but we were trying, and that mattered. One afternoon, I walked past the break room and stopped in the doorway. Lisa and her team were gathered around a whiteboard, arguing playfully about a new interface design. Someone made a joke. They all burst out laughing, and no one looked over their shoulder. No one flinched. No one whispered. It hit me, right then. This was the company I had always dreamed of building. Not polished, but proud. Not afraid, but free. I didn't say anything. I just watched and smiled, because this wasn't my victory. This was ours. And for the first time in years, I no longer felt like I was rebuilding something broken. I was finally building something whole. I didn't hear from Andrew after that day. Not a call, not a letter, not even one of those passive-aggressive texts he used to send that read like apologies but never said sorry. He disappeared, and I didn't go looking. But news has a way of finding you when you've made peace with silence. 3 months after the purge, an old friend from Stanford texted me, "Saw your ex at Best Tech in Schaumburg, selling printers." I stared at the message for a moment, rereading the words. Not because I didn't believe them, but because a small part of me still remembered the man who once held my hand in the rain before ego hollowed him out. She sent a photo. I didn't ask for it, but she did anyway. Andrew stood behind a counter in a red polo shirt and khakis, staring down at a barcode scanner. There was a smudge on his glasses. His shoulders slumped forward, like the weight of his own choices had finally caught up to him. He wasn't angry, He wasn't bitter. He was empty. The man who once laughed as he mocked me over steak and red wine now explained warranty policies to customers who barely looked up from their phones. There was no grand downfall, no scandalous tell-all, just slow erosion, the kind that strips you, layer by layer, until there's nothing left but the echo of who you used to be. I learned later that he had tried to sue Colworth for wrongful termination. He lost, of course. The evidence was airtight. His attorney dropped him halfway through. His name was scrubbed from every corporate archive. Articles that once praised his leadership acumen were quietly edited. He became what so many mediocre men become when the scaffolding of privilege collapses. Forgettable. Someone once asked me if I felt sorry for him. I didn't. Pity implies that something tragic happened to him. But nothing happened to Andrew. Everything that came he built with his own hands. And when the walls fell in, he was holding the hammer. There's a kind of justice that doesn't need courtrooms. It comes in the form of silence, of irrelevance, of watching the world move on without you. He used to believe the world revolved around him. Now, even his shadow doesn't linger. I never responded to my friend's photo. I just looked at it once, then deleted it. There was nothing more to say, nothing more to feel, not even satisfaction, just closure. Because in the end, this story was never about Andrew. It was about the system that let him rise, and the woman who tore it down, piece by piece, smile by smile, silence by silence. And now it was done, not with fire, not with fury, but with truth, and the calm that follows it. There are days when I still wake up before the sun. Old habits die slowly, but I don't rush anymore. I pour my coffee slowly now. I open the windows. I let the light in. And sometimes I just sit in silence, not out of sadness, but because the war is over, and I won. Not the kind of victory people post about. Not champagne on rooftops or viral headlines. Those came and went. The real victory is quieter. It's walking through the halls of Colworth Systems and hearing laughter that doesn't shrink into silence when a man walks by. It's seeing women lead meetings without explaining their credentials 3 times. It's interns asking hard questions without fear of being labeled difficult. It's watching a culture change because someone finally said, "No more." I don't run every meeting now. I don't need to. I've built a team that doesn't just protect the mission, they embody it. Colworth is no longer my company. It's ours. And someday it will belong to people I'll never meet. And I'm okay with that, because I didn't just build a company. I built a place where people can belong without bending, where they can grow without shrinking. I mentor young women in tech now, not because they need my help. Most of them are far more brilliant than I ever was at their age. But because I want them to know you don't have to survive a man like Andrew to be powerful. You don't have to be broken first. You're allowed to thrive just because you're good. Every year now, we award a scholarship in the name of Carla, the intern who cried outside the elevator that day. She didn't stay at Colworth. She went back to school. Now she runs her own startup in San Diego. We still talk sometimes. She sends me photos of her dog. I send her articles I think she'll roll her eyes at. It's the kind of relationship I never had with my mentors. The kind built on honesty, not hierarchy. As for Andrew, he's just a name now, a memory that doesn't sting, a chapter that has been read, understood, and shelved. I don't hate him. I don't thank him. He was simply the spark. But I was the fire. People ask me sometimes if I'd do it all over again, if I'd lie about who I was, if I'd stay silent all those years. And the truth is, yes, because without that silence, I never would have heard what the world truly sounds like when you stop pretending. I built something that matters, not just for me, but for everyone who was ever told they weren't enough. And one day, when I'm no longer here, Colworth will still stand, not as a tech giant, but as a monument to the quiet power of women who refused to stay small. This is not the end of my story, but it is the part one needed to tell. I was Vivian Cole, the woman they mocked, the one they underestimated, and this was the day they learned who I really was.